could everyone take a seat? Okay. So we're going to get started now. This is the AI in the Enterprise panel. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to start off by introducing our esteemed panelists, starting with John Apostolopoulos. John is VP and CTO at Cisco's Enterprise segment, where he drives the technology and architecture direction for Cisco's efforts in the enterprise space. He founded Cisco's Innovation Lab that covers a broad portfolio including IoT, wireless, application-aware networking, indoor location-based services, connected car, and visual analytics. He's published over 100 papers and has 70 granted U.S. patents. He was a consulting professor of EE at Stanford and frequently gives invited lectures at MIT. He received his BS, MS, and PhD from MIT. Next is Mitali Dhar. Mitali is Director of Global Product Partnerships at Google. She leads the strategic partnerships and business development teams that negotiate and manage content partnerships, API integrations, data licensing, and other product enabling relationships for a number of Google's product areas, including search, Google Assistant, web, and AI and machine learning. Mitali has degrees in computer science, electrical engineering, and management science from MIT, and an MBA from Harvard Business School, which we won't hold against her. Next is Andrew Fano. Andrew is a managing director at Accenture Technology Labs, where he leads the AI R&D group. The AI R&D group is focused on applied research on natural language processing and machine learning. Andrew also leads the Accenture and MIT Alliance in business analytics. During his 20 years at Accenture, Andrew's research has explored the application of text mining and machine learning to a wide array of industries, including products, industrial equipment, insurance, pharma, retail, security, packaged goods, and aerospace. He earned his PhD from Northwestern University in AI. Next is Chris Farmer. Chris is Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing Officer for Afiniti. He is responsible for marketing, press engagement, and strategy. He also has an active role in Afiniti's fundraising activities and broadening the general awareness of Afiniti. And finally, Usman Rabbani. Usman is the Global Head of Innovation and Technology at KKR, a leading private equity firm with $100 billion in assets under management and includes 100 companies around the world across sectors and geographies that collectively spend over $10 billion on enterprise technology. Usman is a member of KKR's Americas and European investment committees and portfolio management committees, and assesses the impact of technology disruption on new and existing investments. Previously, Usman was a partner at McKinsey & Company, a founder and CTO of a cloud-based video surveillance platform, and an enterprise software developer for over 10 years. All right. Well, we have an amazing and esteemed group of panelists, and what we wanted to do was start off with a few short answer questions that we're going to kick things off with. Just go down the panel. The first one was, how would you describe how attitudes around AI and have evolved at the board and C-suite levels over the last 18 to 24 months? Is the interest still growing? Is it leveling? Is it cooling off? And I'm going to start with you, John.
It's growing, continues to grow.
I don't know how to be controversial here. I mean, there's no other answer, but it's growing. So.
Yeah, I think it's definitely growing, and we're going from the, oh my God, what is this thing? We definitely have to do something, to people having dipped their toes in the water, to now hopefully starting to get a more realistic view of what you can actually use it for.
Yeah, I mean, transforming. And I think across different geographies, that's happening at different paces. I think particularly in the US, there's been some awareness which has grown exponentially, In emerging markets, there is now starting to be an understanding, and we're now starting to have conversations about this, which actually 2 years ago you just couldn't actually have.
I echo all that. Definitely growing from what we see in our portfolio. So is the confusion and hype surrounding this topic, but definitely increasing, both of those things.
Excellent. Actually, on that topic of hype, a majority of you identified earlier on the theme of hype versus reality as something that we should take some time to eliminate today. Could each of you name just a use case of AI in the enterprise that you think is overhyped, and another one that you think is underappreciated?
Okay, so autonomous cars, for example, is something, as we've already heard today, it's a journey, so there's a lot more to be done. That's an example of overhyped as today. For underhyped, education. I mean, I have to learn something every day, and leveraging context and leveraging making customized learnings for people, I think, could be hugely beneficial for people in school as well as people in the enterprise.
So one of the overhyped areas that I've been seeing or noticed is more in the chatbots area. It's something that was a very early example of how AI could help users communicate better or communicate with enterprises. And I think a lot of enterprises jumped into that space trying to develop an experience, but it was very early, and I don't think we've really yet nailed exactly how users want to communicate with enterprises with machines in between.
I would definitely second the chatbot example. One area also I've seen a lot of exaggeration in is in the IoT space and predictive maintenance. So there's the assumption that because you've collected data, you're going to be able to predict when any individual machine breaks down. And in practice, that often turns out to be the hardest use case with telematics data, and there are a number of other applications that are potentially more tractable to look at.
One of the things we see at Afiniti is a lot to do with workforce management and people trying to think about how you can apply AI to problems that really today either don't necessarily need it, or the returns are maybe not the way you should be allocating your resources. I think there are some fantastic things happening across the world, but it's remarkable how people in different geographies are thinking, how can we apply or use machine learning in particular on different applications, which maybe the ROI is not actually there at the moment. So I'd definitely say that.
So my pick for overhype would be predictive analytics. I think the idea that a lot of businesses are sitting on data that can be used to predict the future about their business or their operations, I think is in the category of overhype. And then underhype, I'd say any of the subspecialties in medicine that really have to do with understanding images, like radiology or dermatology. I'm constantly surprised to see why there aren't more decision support systems available for physicians to make much better data-driven decisions around diagnoses. Thank you.
So we wanted now to turn to some of the topics that were mentioned. We want to go a little bit deeper on each of them. I wanted to ask each of the panelists a question. So I'll start with Usman. Usman, you have a really interesting lens as head of technology and innovation at KKR, a portfolio of over 120 companies, and wanted to see what themes you could share in terms of the big picture, both on the investing and operating sides.
Sure. So I'll comment on investing and then, sorry, can you hear me now? Okay. Comment on investing and then on operating. On the investing side, I'll offer two observations. One is that we have a growth, we're a late-stage private equity firm, so we do a lot of leveraged buyouts, and in that context, you don't see much of this in terms of AI-driven companies. However, we also have a growth equity fund that does invest in mid-stage technology companies. And if I just give you some data points, this year we've looked at about 20 businesses. And about 15 of those 20 businesses had a very strong, at least on paper, story about artificial intelligence and machine learning, no matter what they were doing. They could be cloud brokers, they could be SaaS integration tools, they could be data analytics visualization platforms, they were call center software optimization algorithms. Every one of them had a very strong pitch around AI and machine learning. However, in our assessment, only one of them was actually doing something distinctive and interesting with machine learning, with data at scale, et cetera. So, just data points, but again, it points to the fact that entrepreneurs feel like they have to have a very compelling story around AI and machine learning, just like 5 years ago, everybody felt like they had to have a real clear answer on big data and analytics. And so they come hard, especially in the investment context, with pitches that are anchored in AI and machine learning. And frankly, they're starting to lose credibility with investors when you come at it from that angle, rather than coming at it from, here's the problem that we solve, and yeah, we use a number of different techniques to solve that problem. So that's one on the investing side. On the operating side, to give you a feel for our portfolio, we own everything from the largest chicken farm in China to the largest vending machine business in Europe, to companies like Toys R Us and Sonos and GoDaddy. Some of these companies you recognize, some of them you won't. And collectively, as Vivek was mentioning, they spend about, depending on how you count technology, which is hard to do, they spend collectively anywhere from $5 to $10 billion a year on hardware, software, services. And every year we ask all these companies to tell us what they're using, what they're buying, what are they using it for, and we have that fact base. And when you look at that fact base, the number that I would propose to you that is spent on real artificial intelligence, machine learning, predictive analytics, et cetera, is south of 50 million. So it's in the very, very beginning stages of enterprise adoption, is one conclusion. The other conclusion is that we really buy some crappy companies. But if you believe that it's a reflection of the economy, I think we're just at the beginning of where enterprises are trying to understand this stuff, pilot this stuff, apply it to real use cases. So in a way, it's very exciting where we are. But here in the Valley, it feels like we're much farther ahead than we actually are.
Terrific. Wanted to ask John to go a little bit deeper around different technology areas. So John, you have this broad mandate around technology across Cisco. I mentioned the range of areas: IoT, wireless, indoor location-based services, connected vehicles, visual analytics, and that was just a few. So you have this broad view. So what do you think are a few IoT applications, AI IoT applications, that are really working today in enterprise, and where do you see a lot of potential over the next, say, 24 months?
Cool. Yeah, that's really exciting a topic. So some things that are working really today include security. Okay, and I can go into a lot of detail on that. I may not cover that right here, but maybe in questions if people care about security. Another thing that's happening today, which all of you probably can relate to, is indoor location-based services. So for example, I think everybody in this room probably has one of these, and outdoors you use this for location-based services. Basically, it does triangulation from GPS signals from multiple satellites, tells you where you are, what's around you, how to get from point A to point B. Well, those same services that you get outdoors, the analogy of that indoors are incredibly valuable. We saw discussions today about retail and how valuable it is for retail. Also for places like airports and hospitals and schools and hotels, it's also really valuable. It's valuable for the user, myself, as well as the venue owner, because they get lots of useful info. Since it's an MIT crowd, maybe I can share with you some of the major advancements that are happening recently. So for example, in this room, how many wireless APs do you think are needed to localize every cell phone with Wi-Fi turned on to within 1 or 2 meters? How many of you say we need at least 3 or more APs? Raise your hands. Okay. How many say we only need 2 APs? How many say we only need 1 AP? How many say we need 0 APs? Okay, so there may be some other ways to get the 0 APs, but fundamentally you need one. So for example, in this room, if you have a single AP on top and you know the room is rectangular shape and you know the height, you can have an antenna array there that that looks for angle of arrival and then can isolate every wireless device to within plus or minus 1 or 2 meters. This angle of arrival is something we actually do every day. We actually have 2 acoustical antennas here, which we use to figure out where noise where sound comes from. That helps us solve the cocktail problem. We can do the same thing for indoor location. And having that ability to very accurately estimate people's location or assets' location indoors is humongously valuable. And we're going to see a lot of advances, I think, coming out of this very soon. In terms of things that are coming up, visual analytics is something that I think is going to be really very valuable with a lot of surprising use cases. So for example, today we use mobile devices to take pictures and identify pets and objects and so forth. And we saw about the medical imaging examples, which are really very powerful. What happens is many of those examples use conventional visual sensors, red, green, blue type cameras, what the human does, okay? But what they allow you to do is to basically do what a human does, perhaps equally well, perhaps slightly better. There are huge advances in the types of visual sensors that are becoming available. Infrared, which can help you see at night, which can help you see the temperature that food's cooked. Multispectral imaging, which is very useful for agriculture and other places. LiDAR, depth sensors, so forth. So this huge range of new visual sensors which are coming about would actually can allow machines and humans to do much more than what humans can do before. And that I think is going to open up a lot of possibilities. There could be some interesting architectural changes that occur now too, because these sensors, they produce a large amount of data, and you can't get that data always to the cloud to process it, okay? Maybe if you have one sensor, but in a building like this, you may have 100 or 1,000. You can't get all that data to the cloud because you don't have the bandwidth or it's too expensive. So you need to do the processing at the edge. You need to do the analytics at the edge. But also for IoT, you may have to do the learning at the edge. And this leads to some interesting questions. Because with the cloud, we could bring everything together, big data, and we could have global visibility and perform global optimization of that. But now you may have 10,000 edge nodes where each edge node only has 1/10,000th of all the data. How can you get the equivalent performance where every node only has 1/10,000th of the data, and you still want to do the learning and so forth? So lots of really fascinating distributed analytics types of problems here that come into play. And I think it'd be very interesting and surprising application areas, especially in IoT.
Thank you. Wanted to ask Mitali a question on a slightly different topic. You and Andrew independently had highlighted this theme in our earlier conversations. That was the distinct roles to be played in the emerging AI ecosystem. You know, we've heard about a lot of different technologies, a lot of different use cases, but there's also different roles to be played by different teams and different companies. Could you talk about the distinct role that you see Google in particular playing?
So I think there are two roles that Google's trying to play in this area. One of the areas that I support is our RMI group. It's called the Research and Machine Intelligence Group. And this is mainly a bunch of academics who are trying to create new technology. So some of the things that John mentioned, just trying to figure out, what is the new types of data that can be acquired, and therefore what models can we build on it, and therefore what can we actually put out in the market. And some of the things that have come out of this are, I think it was mentioned earlier, diabetic retinopathy, TensorFlow are examples of new technologies that we've built. So one of the things that Google's really trying to do is figure out what new technology can we actually try and build. We don't really know what the application of those technologies will be, but we do believe that once you build something, someone will figure out what to do with it. And then the other side of it is actually finding the applications for the technology. So we have a whole group under Diane Green called Google Cloud. And their role is to help enterprises figure out how to use technology, how to use the cloud, how to use AI and ML. And so the RMI group normally puts out a bunch of APIs that then become commercialized so that enterprises can use them. So those are the two kinds of roles I think Google's trying to play in this space. And I think on the earlier panel, someone mentioned it's kind of like the gold rush, and the people that will make the money are the ones that build the tools. And I think Google wants to play a very important role in that space, which is there's a lot of hype around AI and ML. Enterprises want to play in this space or want to use it. They just don't know how to do it. So what's the role that Google can do to actually build platforms, build APIs, build tools, so that actually enterprises that don't have data scientists, they don't have ML PhDs on their staff, can actually use these technologies to actually help them build their enterprises.
Excellent, thank you. Now, Andrew, the flip side of that question. So you had also mentioned this this theme of the distinct roles to be played. Could you talk about what that role looks like for Accenture, and then specifically how that plays out in an example? You mentioned telematics earlier, or I think we had talked about medical claims as well.
Sure. So yeah, we are in some ways a good counterpart to Google, where we are not going to be the developers of the core technology, but what we do is we work with Fortune 500 companies to solve a lot of their leading problems. And so what we're going to do in practice is bring in technologies, bring in data from Google, but use our industry knowledge and our relationships with clients to build those solutions. Now, this morning we heard a lot of discussion about autonomous vehicles, and there was one comment that reminded me in practice of some of the challenges that we have in working with the enterprise, which is it would be great if, it would be a lot easier to build autonomous vehicles if there weren't already a whole bunch of cars on the road. And same idea here with the enterprise. It would be a lot easier to build AI-enabled enterprise solutions if the enterprise wasn't already filled with organizations that are designed around existing approaches. Right? And so one example that we had discussed is in the health insurance space. And just to give you a feel for it, I'll go into a little bit of detail. So this was an insurer that processed healthcare claims, and they had a problem where about 3% of their claims, they either overpaid or underpaid. And the challenge was that even though it's only 3%, it was either very difficult and aggravating to try to get money back from a hospital, or very frustrating for the hospital to try to get what they're owed. And so even though it was a small percentage, it created a lot of problems. But it didn't pay to have people look at the claims ahead of time to try to identify them, because it was only 3%. So we did what, as good machine learning people, you might expect, which is build a system to try to predict which claims were problematic. Should be pretty straightforward, right? Well, okay, so let's start with even the sales piece of this. Right? So you build a model, and it's about 40% accurate. Right? Now, whether or not that's good or bad, we can argue about what that means. But first, put yourself in the enterprise's position of hearing, "Oh, we're going to sell you something that's 40% accurate." Right? They're not. If you tell them you're going to sell them a calculator that gets the right answer 40% of the time, they're not very impressed. Now, in practice, it turns out that 40% from a business case perspective is excellent, because before it would have taken a person, you would have to look at 30 some odd cases to find a problematic claim. Now you have to look at 2.5. So it turns out that sure, there's actually a pretty strong business case behind that. Next challenge is, all right, so what does that mean? You have to look at 2 claims, so who's going to look at it? So now, ironically, all the stories are about AI unemploying people, but here we are telling them, oh, now you have to hire people. And the last thing, even though from a enterprise-wide perspective, from the CEO level perspective, of course it makes business sense to do it. In practice, when you're dealing with large organizations, you're selling to one part of the organization, and you have to learn to put yourself in their shoes and understand the impact of what you're trying to provide for them, how it impacts their goals and their solutions. And there's a great line I heard that it's very hard to convince somebody of something if their job depends on not believing it, right? So I can easily convince you that it makes sense to hire enough people so that you reach a break-even point, that the cost of finding the next problematic claim is equal to the benefit that you get. But they look at it as, oh my God, you're making me hire more people. And the last problem along these lines, which I think is fairly general in a lot of situations, is where's your labeled data coming from? Right? So often the organization to whom you're providing the machine learning solution is not the source of the labeled data. And in this case, the labeled data was coming from the group that was resolving the disputes that came up. And for the most part, what they were doing was clawing money back from the hospitals when they had overpaid. And they were being compensated on how much money they got back. So when you go to them and you say, hey, do you mind if we use your data? Even though, again, they're part of the same company, but you go to this group and you say, hey, can you give me the data, because we want to build a system that's going to predict which claims are problematic and create fewer claims for you to go after. Right? They're not exactly, the incentives are not aligned very well for them to support that. Right? So So these are a lot of the issues that in practice, even though the technical solution may work fairly well, everything from how the organization is going to perceive a machine learning solution, to the incentives around providing the data, to the impact on the workforce is just as hard, if not harder, a problem than developing the models to begin with.
So that's a great segue to a question for Chris. Chris, when we were talking earlier, you had mentioned something really interesting, which was that a great example of a sign of the maturity of the AI ecosystem is the appreciation that quantified business metrics matter, the kinds of things that persuade business decision makers. So could you share a specific example or two of what that looks like in practice?
Sure, absolutely. First, I just wanted to say, I think this has been such a fantastic day, and learning so much in particular about what so many companies which are at the forefront of thinking about what is going to be next in this ecosystem, how actually to do the democratization of AI and MI and ML. It's just been fascinating to learn about, and it's equally fascinating to hear that so many of these organizations are thinking about creating these products whereby they don't as of yet know what the actual use case for them would be, but realize that actually it's the right thing to be doing to be investing in the creation of these technologies to start off with. I think then what I was going to go on to say is obviously a lot of organizations and enterprises today are not in the space or have the expertise whereby they can put the resources into thinking at this hedonistic level about what they can create and so forth. So a lot of it is actually about impact. And, particularly businesses that are, using a lot of your algorithms or thinking about how they want to adapt them in very practical ways. Because in a lot of cases, even the installation and the practical uses of them require time and resources which are finite, right? And so what we do, we try and help organizations think about the right way to allocate those resources and use AI and ML in order to improve their business outcomes. So what we do is when we're installing and when we're using these pieces of technology, we do a fundamental on-off cycle whereby, at least to start off with organizations, we're able to very tangibly prove the impact that this particular install is having across a particular business metric compared to all the other noise that's happening from performance improvements. So as a prime example, we may well cycle technology on for 12 minutes and then off for 3 minutes and repeat that 4 times in an hour, so we can actually very tangibly prove the performance differential of these particular products over a particular point in time. And you were talking about very tangible examples. So one of the clients we're working with that we can talk about is T-Mobile. And we work almost every week and every month with their data teams to assess the absolute impact of each of the different products that we're installing. And one of the products that we're using with them is about behavior pairing algorithms for customers and individuals within their contact centers, and pairing people on the basis of behaviors to improve efficiencies and business performance. And we work with them to prove this particular product delivered 137 million in incremental revenue to them over the course of a 12-month period. And then for them, right, this is a really tangible way of proving that, obviously this investment was the right thing to do. This is actually working, but also, it's a way that, to be honest with you, the way in which we get billed as well. So it kind of works because we take a percentage of that. But I think being able to prove to businesses the tangible outcome of delivering or installing these particular products is very, very helpful, because then we will be able to go to other companies which, as we were saying, don't necessarily have the expertise to create these products or actually even want to get into the stage of creating these products, but want to use them from other people. Is a great way to go about it. Right.
What a great story. So one of the things that I really appreciated was these really concrete stories of use cases and applications that throughout the day, and particularly on this panel, that you may not have never thought of. I certainly had definitely many examples that I hadn't thought of. I'm hoping that in the Q&A we can explore some more specific stories and cases where this has been done. In the interest of time, what I wanted to do now was do a rapid fire round, and then we'll get to the Q&A. So in the rapid fire round, I'm going to ask all the panelists to quickly answer one question, and we're going to go down like we did at the beginning. And this is so the first question is about technology cycles. The technology cycles, people often describe them in 15-year terms, whether that's PCs, web, mobile. What year of the cycle are we in for the current generation of AI?
I'd say about 1/3 of the way through the current cycle.
I would say we're very, very early in the cycle. I think especially when you think about enterprises and their use of this technology, I think they still are figuring out what it actually means to use AI and ML. But I will say from a technology company perspective, like a company like Google, we are much further along. I think we've been investing in this technology for longer.
Yeah, I would agree. We're early in the cycle, but one switch I starting to see the beginning glimpses of is both in analytics and AI. Until now, there's been a lot of, well, give us your data and maybe we'll be able to do something useful with it, even though the data wasn't designed for the particular application we have in mind, to starting to think about designing to collect the data that you need in support of the specific problem. There's enough confidence. We're in the position in the cycle where there's enough confidence in the technology to design around that from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I think incredibly early. I think, though, the one thing I would say is I think it varies slightly depending upon the type of business you're working with and the geography. I think businesses in California that have started off on this path are obviously far more willing to accept new technologies, and it's almost the focus of their creation, which is very different from if you're working with businesses in Africa or Eastern Europe, which we're starting to do a lot more of. So I think I'd say we're very, very early across the cycle globally, but I'd say particularly some businesses within the US, Western Europe are a little bit further along that line.
Agree. I'm a big fan of the saying that we tend to underestimate the impact and effect of technology in the short term, and then overestimate the impact in the short term and vastly underestimate the impact in the long term. So it's a question of where we are we in the short term or long term, and I think we haven't even taken our other foot off the starting block. So we're in that very clear phase of the promises out there, the use cases are emerging, but we're nowhere near, I think, where this is eventually going to go. So very optimistic about that.
I just want to add to that. So
Yeah.
I think what Chris was saying, even in emerging markets, we were just talking about this before the panel started. I was in Brazil last week, and it's interesting to see even companies in these emerging markets starting to pay attention to AI. And one of the reasons I think they are paying attention to AI is because there are so many users in that market. And I think throughout the day, people have been talking about AI and ML depends on data. And because there are so many users coming online, there's so much data they're collecting about their users, they don't know what to do with it, but they're starting to pay attention to it because they're realizing that AI could be a way for them to become more efficient in their operations. So I definitely think there's a huge opportunity in emerging markets for them to be using AI more creatively.
Terrific. The last rapid fire round here question I had was trying to speculate a little further out, and that was in terms of the impact AI will have on the enterprise workforce on, say, a 5 or even a 10-year horizon. Would you say that you're more worried about job loss or optimistic about the productivity benefit?
See, the way I look at it is that the benefits to society, which the employees are part of, I think is going to be huge. Improved energy management for buildings like this, for cities, improved agriculture yield and better use of water, irrigation, pesticides, safer cars and so forth, medical benefits. So it'll be huge, huge benefits to society. There will be various other issues there in terms of employment and so forth, and that's a hard one to guess. But hopefully the benefits will help make many more opportunities for people too.
I think similar to what Usman was saying, I think we overestimate the impact, and I don't think we can really predict what the future holds. One of the things that makes me really excited about new technology, especially AI, is, I think it was, again, discussed in one of the earlier panels, is about creativity. People talk about worrying about job loss, and definitely when it comes to some kind of manual work, maybe there will be job loss because there's more efficiency that will come about because of AI. But I think in the creativity space, there's an opportunity for new things to emerge. VR, AR is a good example of this. At Google, we have a technology we've been talking about. We have a paper around this. It's called Magenta, which is in the music space. And the idea is that because of technology, there'll be new types of music creativity that will happen. In some ways, similar to what happened when the electronic guitar came about, and no one exactly knew how that would change the way music was. So I have a lot of faith in technology actually helping create some new types of work environments or work types that we haven't yet imagined.
This is obviously a very rich topic, and I don't think there's an easy answer. I think in the long term, yes, if anything, AI will grow jobs, grow opportunities by creating new industries the way every previous or most previous technology evolutions have. But I don't want to pretend that it's not also going to bring pain and that there aren't going to be disruptions. One thing Accenture is doing in this space is we have research efforts underway to help both us, we're a company of nearly 400,000 people, as well as clients, be able to predict which skills are most likely to be impacted and identify adjacent roles to try to minimize that impact. But I think it's fair to say that there, even though in the aggregate, I think there's a net positive, there's no question that there's also going to be serious social concerns that have to be addressed.
Yeah, I think just echo everything that's been said up to this point, but just to say that, this is a question which has been taking place over, almost the entirety of history. You think back to when the Industrial Revolution was taking place and the start of automation, and then we'd look at production lines actually coming into force, and then you think about the first silicon processors and computing technology and so forth. There's always been this perpetual argument, and the reality is there has been a shift in the way in which workforces have evolved and worked, and I don't think that's going to change. And I think I just echo what everyone says, that I think I'm just very excited about the opportunity for new jobs that can come out of this in exciting and transformative ways. I think the other thing that actually was mentioned on some of the discussions this morning was actually, I think there's a great opportunity for a lot of AI and ML to enhance the way individuals work as well, right? And I think the reality is I don't think any of us know exactly what will happen. There's for sure going to be a shift. The time scale of that shift, I'm also not sure people are necessarily sure about either, and I'm sure that will vary by geography as well. But I think it's just something that everyone needs to be cognizant of. It's something that people need to be thoughtful of. And however it happens, people need to just remember the net gains that come out of it as well. I mean, let's not stop talking about it.
Of course, I agree with the other panelists on just generally optimism around this. I think, yes, it's going to be disruptive. Yes, it's going to be painful. Net impact will be positive. I think there's a lot of problems, layers and layers of problems in business and in the world that will be solved by AI and machine learning, increased compute, increased algorithms, before we get to the point where we're going to have real societal issues to deal with, where we lose our sense of purpose because robots are doing all the jobs or something. I think that's very, very far off, and we have very, very rich and deep problems to solve before we get to that point. So I think the runway to that pain is very long.
Awesome, thank you. I've clearly picked the wrong question for a rapid fire round with a nuanced question with a very thoughtful panel. So I did want to make time for at least one or two audience questions. I know we're tight. So we've got the top question here is, will AI solve enterprises' security problem, or is the battle already lost?
Can I clarify my question before you answer? Very quickly? Within 18 months, I heard Howie Schroe, professor at CSAIL's cybersecurity lab, say that bots and AI were going to help solve the attack surface problem. And then 18 months later, last December in Vegas, I heard Gartner stand up and say the battle is lost. If somebody wants to hack into your enterprise, they're going to win. And there's nothing technology really can prevent it. And I'm wondering where people stand on that bipolar question.
Great. Let's take a short answer on this one because we have an entire panel devoted to security in just a few minutes. Does anyone want to comment on it very briefly?
I can comment on it. So what happens is the various types of security issues. Thank you. The various types of security issues. Some of the big ones is when you have malware or something inside your network sending things outside. Now, one of the big advantages we have is that to get stuff out, it has to go through the network. So the network, if you actually instrument it appropriately, can get global visibility in terms of what's happening there. And with global visibility, you can run analytics, machine learning, and so forth on it to try to identify the threats. Historically, what we've had to do is we've had to actually have the packets be unencrypted to look inside to see if there's bad things happening. Recently, there have been major advances in terms of being able to determine if there's malware or security threats, even on encrypted flows. And that's a huge advantage because of privacy reasons, because you can have Google Mail or other things where your transport is encrypted and still be able to tell via the packet information, contextual information, and so forth, that with high probability this is a threat. And then by having control across your network, you can actually remediate quickly, that is, isolate the nodes and so forth. So there have been major advances which are helping along these lines, but of course the attackers are going full blast. Yes.
Thanks, John. Usman.
Just a short comment. I think what's really going on is a whole bunch of people are trying to scare the crap out of companies to buy more security products. And so that's the point about the battle is already lost, you've already been hacked, et cetera. And yes, it's a tough problem to solve. But the other side of it is that entire segments of security are being disrupted and reinvented by AI. Endpoint security used to be that you downloaded all these updates into your McAfee or whatever antivirus client. That's gone. We're investors in Cylance, and Cylance uses pattern recognition and machine learning to determine anomalous behavior. And so that whole market is just going to go away and be changed. So I think that's the disconnect you're seeing maybe.
All right. One last question. What are the pain points in an enterprise that AI can, quote, remedy, unquote? Andrew, do you want to?
So I think in practice, you'd almost have to work hard to identify the ones where AI would be irrelevant. The challenge in practice is that if we go back to the previous AI cycles, the problem has been when we try to lead with AI and come in and sell AI. And in practice, when we're doing it right, we're going in and focusing on the problem, and AI tends to play a supporting role. So you'd be hard-pressed, if you name a business function, I think everyone in the room could come up with a way where AI can contribute. And actually, I think, speaking on the marketing side, marketing has often been seen as early on, well, no, they'll never be able to touch the creative side of marketing. And of course, in the last few years, we've seen how it's started to play an important role there as well. So I don't think there really is an area of the enterprise where AI doesn't have a role.
All right, terrific. Let's thank the panelists one more time.